So a lot of you probably noticed I like debunking the Three Mormons YouTube channel. It's pretty interesting, and personally, I think the people on there are legit. I don't think they have insidious or bad intentions. I just think they're complete suckers who got all wrapped up in this story. That being said, they're definitely wrapped up in this whole thing, and they don't even realize it. They did a video recently on Mormon culture, and it caught my eye. I'd like to do a video talking about Jehovah's Witness culture one of these days. Anyways, let's take a look at one of their videos about Mormon culture. Let's get into it.
I try very hard to not make fun of the gospel of Jesus Christ because that's very sacred stuff. But there are consequences of belonging to the church that are purely cultural that God has not, commanded in any way. And I make fun of those things. For instance, what can you think of?
The way we stack our chairs every meeting,
Mormon chairs, yeah.
Yeah, or the way that the deacons that pass the sacrament on Sundays, the way they do that, or line up in the back, or along the row, or back up at the table with the sacrament, like that's purely cultural.
Stand up or sit down at the right time, or not,
Yeah.
Or like caffeine.
Oh yeah, or caffeine, drinking caffeine. A lot of people think that you have to go to BYU if you're a Mormon because that's where you have to find the person you're going to marry. Like God doesn't command you to go to BYU. I mean, that's not a commandment in the church, but it is a commandment to get married in the temple. Mm-hmm. And you see where that cultural side is kind of extrapolated from that commandment, but they're not the same thing.
So here he's saying that a lot of the time Mormons feel pressured into going to BYU if they're not married and they don't have any love interests after they get out of high school. That might be true. They aren't commanded to go to BYU. But think about this. He just said it's a commandment to get married in the temple. To even set foot in the temple, you have to be a Mormon in good standing. You have to have paid your tithes for the entire year. You have to be a full-blown member. Bottom line, plebs aren't getting in. It's a Mormon-only club. So you're required to marry within the church. FYI, that's a marker of a cult from the bite model. Forcing people to only marry within the group isn't a good sign right off the bat. And on that note, how are people expected to find Mormon mates if they decide to go to a secular college? Jehovah's Witnesses are just expected to skip college altogether. You're supposed to find a mate within congregations. District assemblies are good places to meet people. But either way, there are a lot of cultural things with Jehovah's Witnesses that aren't disfellowshipping offenses, but they're seriously frowned upon. I could be wrong, but I don't think a mission is absolutely required for Mormons. I don't think it's a do it or you get kicked out kind of situation. But if you're 20 and you still haven't done a mission, people will start asking questions and gossiping about you. You'll become a social pariah. I knew a Mormon lady whose son decided to join the military right out of high school instead of going on a mission. I can't say how she felt about it, but that kind of thing is an embarrassment to a lot of Mormons. Like the kid is ready to leave the faith or something. So whether these things are commandments or not, you're frowned upon and heavily stigmatized if you don't fall in line and do a lot of this stuff. If you don't fall into their cookie cutter pattern. Controlling behavior like that is also a marker of a cult. Modifying behavior with rewards and punishments. And most of these stigmas don't just come from the members. A lot of this stuff comes down straight from the living prophets. I remember seeing what basically amounts to a commercial for Mormons, where one of their top-ranking officials was telling kids that they have a holy obligation to go on a mission. They might not write these cultural quirks down anywhere, but they're definitely sitting at the headquarters coming up with new ways to peer pressure them into doing what they want. With Jehovah's Witnesses, if you start using the King James Bible, you'll slowly lose every friend you have. It's not required that you use their Bible. It's just expected of you. People will start asking if you've lost trust in the governing body. They'll start wondering why you aren't using the correct translation. They'll start to pre-shun you. So the fact that these guys are sitting here pointing out that it isn't actually a part of doctrine is kind of irrelevant in the end, because it's still required, whether it's doctrine or not. And that's a glaring sign of a cult. Social control. Control over your love life. Control over your sexuality. Control over your friends groups. Control over your leisure time and activities. Control over everything. You might sit there and say they don't control you that much. But think about that. How heavily does it affect your life? How much do you let it dictate your behavior? Is it so deeply ingrained in you that you can't possibly account for all the ways it affects your decisions? I'd be willing to bet it is. Can you imagine life outside the group? Or is it too different to comprehend. Okay, let's continue.
Well, and on top of that, there's also a certain image that people associate with the church. The haircut or the button-up shirt. Yeah, there's just like a lot of things that aren't bad things. It's fine if you fit that mold. It's fine if you have the hair or whatever, the clothes that fit that culture, but it's also fine if you don't.
Yeah. There are Mormons who have tattoos.
Right, exactly.
There are Mormons who don't
Mormons
fit the
with
Utah
really,
mold.
really long beards or long hair. Like guys with long hair.
Like Brigham Young.
Or girls with short hair. I don't know. There's just like a lot of people that don't fit the mold that a lot of people, and it's frustrating to me. I've seen a lot of people come to the church and be ridiculed.
Yeah, they're ridiculed for not fitting the mold. Exactly as I was saying. This stuff might not be written down anywhere, but a lot of it is definitely, overtly encouraged by the living prophets. Maybe not the beard thing, maybe not the long hair thing, but the leadership at the top has a very specific view of what they want the culture to be, and they push it pretty hard. A lot of parts of the culture are held up as equally as important as the doctrine. Not just with Mormons, but with Jehovah's Witnesses too. Something interesting to make note of, though, is that Jehovah's Witnesses actually ban beards. That isn't a cultural thing, that's a doctrine thing. There's no biblical reason for it. They just ban beards. The reason behind it has something to do with the fact that the second president of the Watchtower Society, Joseph Rutherford, didn't want people to be reminded of the founder, Charles Taze Russell, who had a big, bushy beard. The cultural stuff wouldn't be that big of a deal if people weren't as heavily invested in the religion as they are. But it takes up your entire life. It consumes you. It isn't as simple as going to church on Sundays and reading your Bible once a week or something. It takes over your life, to the point where you even start buying your underwear exclusively from the church. Every part of your life gets absorbed into this ideology. This isn't healthy at all. Something else I wanted to mention is that there are some Jehovah's Witnesses who have tattoos too. I could be wrong, but as far as I know, getting a tattoo isn't a disfellowshipping offense. I searched through a good bit of their literature, including their Elder's Handbook, and I didn't see the word tattoo mentioned once. But it's definitely heavily stigmatized. Getting a tattoo is one sure way to get pre-shunned. And when a single organization has the power to take away your entire social structure like that, like with Mormonism in many cases, it's a problem. No organization should have that kind of power over somebody's life. Nobody should be compelled to belong to an organization in that way, to quote Article 20 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. But the big difference between Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons in that respect is that Mormons aren't commanded to shun people who leave the organization, as far as I know. Jehovah's Witnesses are, but again, it's a cultural thing. I've heard plenty of stories about people losing their friends and family because they stopped believing it. That's wrong, whether it's directly commanded by the church or not. If somebody feels strongly enough about an organization selling an invisible product that they'll give up on lifelong friends and family because they aren't a member of this organization anymore, it has way too much control over people's lives. That's the bottom line. I understand people might be saying, but that's just cultural. The leadership can't control how people act. Yes, they can. They can discourage that kind of behavior. They can say it's cult-like and it's wrong. If you've noticed, I've always spoken out against violence or mistreatment. I made an entire video about why we should be nice to Jehovah's Witnesses who come knock on our door, not treat them like garbage. Because I was Jehovah's Witness knocking on doors once. I know what it's like to be in that situation, and nobody deserves to be dehumanized. When we dehumanize people, we lose a part of our own humanity too. It's as simple as that. That's all the leadership has to do. Come out and say, we understand some people fall away from the church for one reason or another. While we hope they come back, what we should be doing is building a stronger bond with them. We shouldn't be mistreating or shaming them. We should want them to feel loved by us. We should show them and everybody else that we care about them, regardless of how they feel about the religion. It's the same with Methodist churches or Catholic churches, or any others. They might not outright order their members to shun people like Jehovah's Witnesses do. And I have to give them that. It's a step up from outright ordering them to. But they didn't do anything to stop it when they had the option to. They could step in and say, no, we should show love to people, no matter what religion they are. Jesus said he was love, and we should imitate that. It's wrong to shun or mistreat people, no matter what. Instead, we get complete silence from the leadership. I hear too many fucking stories of people who haven't talked to their family members in 20 years because they stopped believing the same things. It's wrong, and in this case, I'm blaming the Mormon church for not doing something about it. Try having some principles.
But what I love about preaching the gospel is that as we're building Zion and as we're sending the gospel to all these nations, Mormon culture is changing. The best way to change Mormon culture isn't to leave the church because you hate it. you hate the culture.
Right.
The best way to change Mormon culture is to bring people into the church. Because when you bring people into the church who have different ideas and different opinions, guess what? It's going to make your Sunday school class a little more interesting. When a guy from Idaho was like, oh, I believe this is saying this. And then a guy from Nicaragua is like, oh, yeah, I think you're wrong. Here's what it's saying. And like, it's going to make that change.
Right.
And that's beautiful. That's what building up the kingdom of God looks like.
Okay, did I mishear him, or did he just say,
As we're building Zion and as we're sending the gospel to all these nations,
nope, didn't mishear him. As they're building Zion. What's that even mean? FYI, that's another one of those phrases with loaded language. It means something very specific to insiders that doesn't make any sense to outsiders. Another marker from the Byte model. And here's another one of those loaded language phrases.
I've seen investigators come to church.
What's an investigator? It turns out it's somebody who's investigating the religion, coming to the church, listening to the sermons, all that stuff. But an outsider wouldn't normally know that. And what is Zion? Do they believe they're building something? Some kind of group of people that's eventually going to come to a head? It's like when Jehovah's Witnesses say something like, as we get closer to the end, the greater number will cool off. An outsider might have some peripheral idea of what they're talking about, might be able to reason their way through it. But a Jehovah's Witness hearing that phrase knows exactly what they're implying, because they see it in the literature, they hear it from the podium. It's their justification for why people leave the religion. Loaded language and cliches. It falls under thought control on the Byte model. Now about what he was saying. He said the best way to break the cultural stuff is to bring in new people. But he should know by now that it never works out that way. When somebody joins a group like that, they go through something of an afterglow period, where they want to do everything the right way. They start imitating what they see from other people. What he's suggesting might be feasible in a more open church, but obviously not groups like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, or other extremists. They're shouted down and peer pressured into doing things a certain way. I understand what they're doing here. They're trying to reform the church from the inside. They're shining a light on this whole culture thing. And I can honestly deeply respect that goal, but I don't know that it's going to do much. They're making a reasonably big splash in Mormon culture. So who knows, maybe it'll do some good. But if it does, it won't be because Mormons watch it and change their minds on how they should act. It'll be because the leadership agrees with their assessment and starts pushing the culture in that direction. I think it all hinges on the leadership and the direction in which they want the culture to go. Who knows, maybe it'll do some good. Oh yeah, and I don't know if you guys heard, but it sounds like the Mormon Church is trying to phase out the use of the name Mormon and replace it with just LDS. I think they've been doing that for a while, but now they're putting in real effort. I wonder if the Three Mormons are going to change their name from Three Mormons to Three Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Just rolls off your tongue. I guess time will tell. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. FYI, I'm going to FFRF-Con in San Francisco from November 2nd to 4th. So if you're in the San Francisco, California area and you want to meet me, come to FFRF-Con. I'll be there the entire weekend. Pretty excited to meet some of you guys. I'll be there with Holy Kool-Aid and Genetically Modified Skeptic. I can't wait. Don't forget to check me out on Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and Discord. Thanks for watching, guys.